And then we're going to talk about stencils masking, a little bit of underglaze painting, and then you're going to get to play around with those things and figure those things out. So let's talk about templates real quick. So it's really important that as you are making your project, especially if you're doing something that has multiple pieces, that you have a template. And the biggest reason for a template is, let's see if I can illustrate this for you. If we have a vase like this here, and then we have another one that kind of mimics it, whatever it's going to do, okay, and we cut one out and we make it, but we want them to fit together or relate to each other, and then we have the one that's made, and then we're like, oh, and I'm just going to use that, so this is now three-dimensional, made out of clay. I'm going to use that as my template. And so you use that as your template, and now this second piece is going to be smaller when it's done, because they're not going to dry at the same rate. Because as we're working on this, between making, so workable clay and leather hard, you're shrinking between 3 and 5%. And then between leather hard and bone dry, that's another probably 2 to 4% there. So if your piece is, let's say, bone dry, we could be at 9%, 8 or 9% shrink. And then all of a sudden you line it up. So if this was, say, 10 inches tall, when we started, it's now going to be at 9 1/4. And if we start our next project at the second piece at 9 1/4, it's going to be, when it's bone dry, 8 and, let's say just 8 1/2. And so there's going to be a size difference. So you're going to want to have that template so that they fit together. And it's not that hard to do, depending on what your project is. A template could be anything from just straight measurements to a cutout, and you decide what that looks like. So we'll just come in here and make a template. So we're going to go with kind of a standard vase shape. Like so. And scissors. And then we're going to cut it out. You don't have to cut it out. We can push through the paper to create our marks. Okay, that'll be fine for today. Okay, so that's your first one, and then you're going to create your second one. And it's super important that as you're doing your stencils, as you're doing your templates, that you manage your paper. What does that mean? It means it's your job to keep track of these things. What it means is when you're done with them, it's your job to throw them away. Okay? Leaving these all over the place is not okay. All right, so we're gonna have this. And then I'm just gonna come in like this, because it's gonna come in and be kind of the opposite shape. When you do an interconnected piece, things that relate to each other, if they're going to be kind of a tight fit, you still need to make sure there's at least like a 1/4 inch of gap between one project and the other, so that you don't have touching when we're done. So with my templates, now I have two pieces like that. And then I would make those, and then I would do whatever story and design I'm gonna do, and they're gonna relate to each other, okay? It's not that big of a deal. Just make sure you create your templates, and then stick those in your folder so that you have those. Another good thing is, if you start making, and one of them survives and one of them cracks, with your template, you can start over, okay? You have that option because you have the measurements, you have the thing you can start over with. All right, next really quickly, throw me that chunk of clay right there. Couple of things on building as we go just a little bit bigger. And when I say bigger, I'm not talking huge. We shouldn't be going over about 8 inches tall. Roughly. I mean, there's going to be an exception for nearly everything, but you're making two pieces, so they're going to be medium-sized. We've done this building technique before. Does anyone know how to draw birds? All right. If you get a little of this dark dust, it's just the underglaze. It'll be okay. It's not very much. All right, so we want to talk about this real quick. So as you're building and you go bigger, there's two types of connecting, and I drew them on the board here, right on the left. We have a tapered or an angled connector. A mitered is actually what they call that, or we have a butt or a square connector. And both are okay. If you do a butt where it just sits on top like that, and your cuts are square, that's great. But some of you get confused and you're gonna build it with your wall on the side. And if your wall's on the side, when you go to put on your other piece, you're gonna have to hold it there to get that to go. But if your wall's on top, so we build it there, and when we set it there, it just sits, okay? Not a huge deal. The next thing from here, you see the little tiny circles. As we go bigger, we create more tension in our projects. And so if I'm going to be doing my scoring and slipping, I'm gonna come in and make sure that I put in a coil, okay? Now, if you can envision how we make something, the first one's not a problem. I can put a coil right in there right now, right? But the next one's going to be a problem, right? Because we put it on top and it's hard to get that coil in there. So the next one, this will be the top here. It's gonna set right there. What I would do is come in here and score the top, and then score a coil on top of that, so that when I put it down, all I have to do is reach in there with a wooden knife and compress that coil into place, okay? So it's super important that you put coils in. The most important places to put coils in, if we're looking at a piece, is up at the top where the walls come together, because that's where all the tension goes. It starts to dry, and the body dries slower than the top, and that top will want to open and crack. Okay, I know that was more conceptual than work, but and visual. Does anyone have any questions on that? I think overall that does a good job. Next thing I want to talk about is sometimes if our project is wider, it'll start to sag a little bit as we build it, okay? And so here's my project there. It's a little bit wider. When we do our walls, all of our walls are going to be the same thickness or height, right? And if we have a piece that's now, and this is going to be project specific, because not all your projects are going to work this way. But we have our walls up, just pretend they're there, and it's like this and it's starting to sag. All I'm going to do while I'm building is put another wall in the middle. So I'll have a wall here, a wall here, and a wall here, okay? And what that'll look like in 3 dimensions is we have our walls. There's our project. We have a wall there. We have our wall there, right? That makes sense. But it's sagging, so we're just going to put a wall here. Now, depending on what your project is, that wall can be permanent or that wall can be temporary. And if you get to that point, you're like, I'm putting this on, it's sagging. I want to put a wall in, but I need to take it out. Can you help me figure out how that's going to happen? Because what we'll do is we'll put on our top, then we'll lift it, and then we'll be able to pull that wall out, okay? And it just depends on what's happening there. So that's something to consider. As our projects go a little wider, they tend to sag just a little bit. Storing. So to keep our projects working and workable in a leather hard state, there's a couple of things that you should do. As you and a lot of it depends on when your project, what stage your project's at. So let's say you started working today and you got your front and back cut out of a project and you got some walls put on. So let me hurry and pretend to put a wall on here. Yeah. Oh. So we go like this, and we get a wall right there, and then we have a wall right there, right? We're going for the free form right now. So we have a wall, and we have the front and the back, but they're not attached. And the bell's about to ring, and I gotta go, I need to fix this. So if I were to take this and set that there, and this is my first day, this board is going to soak a good chunk of that water out of your clay, okay? The walls are going to dry out quicker because they're freestanding. So there's a couple of things that I would do. The first day and the second day, if we're getting into the 5th or 6th day, we'd adjust this. But the first thing I would do is I would take a bag and I would put it on my board and I would put my project, if you need help, ask, inside the bag, okay? So it's not touching the board at all. That board is going to soak up water. We want our project to be soft, workable, maybe a light leather hard when we come back next time, right? Okay. Also, depending on where you're at, let's say we have 2 pieces like this. Here's a front and a back. Most of the time what I'll do is I'll put the piece that does not have the walls up, I'll put it down first, then I'll put my second piece on top and it has the walls. Now you could just cover that whole thing up, but those walls are gonna dry out a little bit. So what I would do there is get some paper towels. So you can sort of see this. Here's my walls up like that. I'd get my paper towels, get them wet, squeeze them out, and then I would just wrap them over my walls like that. It's really important the first couple of days that you wrap your projects up really well and you keep the moisture level pretty high. You don't want them to dry out quickly. And the reason for that is if I have two pieces of clay and they're drying out, one might kind of shrink and warp one way, one might shrink and warp another, and when we put them on, they won't actually fit anymore. Okay, one might shrink more than the other. So we've got to make sure we're on a longer project that we're keeping our moisture content up until it's completely built, and then you can kind of let it get to that leather hard stage. All right, let's make sure I covered everything I wanted to there. Make sure you create a template for your project. You don't have to, but it's going to save you problems if you have problems. Put a wall in and make sure you put in coils everywhere, especially up where the two corners meet up at the top. Storing your project, keeping them from drying out too fast is going to be a big deal. We're going to start this project on Tuesday, so we're going to go Tuesday, Thursday, and then we won't be back until the next Monday. You want your project to be workable, soft leather hard, through at least the third day. Then it can start getting to leather hard fourth day, hard leather hard fifth day. You can kind of finish it up the sixth and seventh day. Okay. Okay. Any questions there? I really want you to play with some clay today, so I have a few more things to show you. And we'll run from there. Okay. So stencils and masking. Stencils and masking. They can be done anytime, but I find that they work the best when it's a good leather hard. I don't like stencils and masking when it's bone dry. And I'm not a huge fan of it when it's workable wet. Grab a couple of these. So a good leather hard. I threw these tiles out yesterday and barely bagged them. They were touching a board, so they were touching the tables. And they're leather hard, right? There's a little bit of bend, but not a lot. And so they'll be good for what we're doing. Next thing. Okay, so here's some of the steps for stencils and masking. You need to, let's talk about where you get your images from. I don't care. Google Images is just fine. I go and search all the time, flower, simple line drawing, right? And that's what I get. There is a fine line in the copyright world, and we're not going to cross it. We can take people's images that are on Google Classroom and use them as our own because one, we're doing it in a different medium, and two, most of the things we're doing are just random images. There's probably 1,000 times 1,000 of that mountain and that. I mean, if you were to look at mountains in Spanish Fork, Utah, there are hundreds of thousands of images, and it doesn't really matter which one you take. If it's a very specific image, has specific icons or people in it, and you were using it, you would need to at least give them credit, but I'm not too worried about it. So I just searched birds, mountains, and there's a whole bunch here, and I'll print out some more here in a minute. We don't want to go overly complex for our images. This is pretty complex. You could do a multi-layered stencil and masking system. So you could do all the different layers, so the mountains, the trees, the sun or the moon, whatever it is, the circle. There's a whole bunch of things we can do with that. Or we can go simple, and I'm going to show you a little bit simpler. All right, so where do we find them? Google. Sketch them out. You can draw your own. They should be fairly simple, not a lot of fine lines. If you know how to use, say, like Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Photoshop, if you want to take photos of people or photos of things and rasterize them or reduce the colors into workable black and white, you're more than welcome to do that as well. Whatever it is you need to do to get your project going. Okay. So here's some steps. Find and create your images for your stencils, right? You need to do that. You need to have made your project. So today our project is a tile. It needs to be a good leather hard. It shouldn't be bone dry, and again, that's because the water doesn't soak in the same. And the colors tend to sit on the surface and crack off a little bit. You need to decide how you're going to cut it, and this actually matters. If we use scissors, we create a cut path, and you may not want that cut path when you do it. So play around with that. If we use X-Acto knives, you're going to have to play around with that as well. So, good place for scissors. I'm going to do this mountain, and I'm just going to come in here and basically follow along. This is a mask because, well, I'll show you why in a second. If you want to do the same thing with an X-Acto knife, you're more than welcome to. If you have access to a plotter or a cutter, a silhouette or a Cricut, you're more than welcome to use those as well. I have one at home. All right, so we have a 2-piece right there. Okay, if I want to make this a 3-piece, then I can come in here. I'm just gonna run through here. All right, you be as careful or particular as you want. The smaller your paper size, the easier it is. Flat's not a problem, but if we were doing it onto something round, the smaller your paper size, the easier it is to wrap and to mold. Okay, I'm going to set these over here for a second. This would be a stencil, and you would just take an X-Acto knife, and you would come in here, and I'm not going to cut all of these out, I'm just going to cut a couple. One of the nice things about doing a stencil like this is if you're being careful, the thing you're cutting out can create a mask as well. Anyone know who the artist Banksy is? I'm sure you've all heard of him, or most of you have heard of him. A lot of graffiti artists, if they're doing words and stuff, they're just free-forming it. And when I say free-forming it, I mean they've practiced on some back alley wall thousands of times before they take it out where people can see it. They're not just going out there, well, some of them are. Some graffiti's pretty ugly. But they're going out there and being like, I practice this is my art, and I'm doing it. People like Banksy, or collectives like Banksy, depending on your theory on who and what Banksy actually is, a lot of times they use stencils, and they use masking so that they can cover things up, so that they can make things have color where they want it. It also makes it so that they can take whatever it is, hurry and spray paint whatever image they want instead of having to actually draw it out. So if you need to think of yourself as a little Spanish fork Banksy on clay, go for it. All right, and I'm not gonna spend too much time on this because I think you'll get the idea. I do want to know who knows how to make snowflakes. Anyone know how to make a snowflake? I would hope, but you never know. We did snowflakes a couple years ago. I don't know where I probably went in the trash. We had you may not have remembered it from the beginning of the term. There's a really complex 3-dimensional one. That was kind of cool. Who wants to make me kind of a small snowflake? Okay. All right. So let's apply some of these things and see what happens. Let's use a car too. Will you go in and just cut the outline of that car? But I need it to be like this with no cut lines. And you don't have to do it on your paper. Okay, let's move forward. So I'm going to take this and cut this down. All right, next step. So decide how you're going to cut it. X-Acto knife, scissors, right? It really is important to pay attention to that. The next is get your colors. You have access to all of the colored slips and all of the underglazes. While we're playing with it today, I want you to stick with just the colored slips. And the only reason for that is this is so much cheaper. So we're just going to take these tiles and recycle them. The underglazes we don't want to waste right now, but when you get to this part of your process, you're more than welcome to use any of them because we're doing it all before we bisque fire. So, and then we're going to, give me that green spray ball. And this is important to pay attention to. We're going to spritz our paper. So we're just going to come in here, and this is going to do a couple of things for us. So you're going to add a little bit of water. It's going to soften the paper fibers so that if we have any inconsistencies, we can kind of work it into the clay. It also is going to act like a magnet. The water now on the paper and the water in our clay will stick and bond together. That's one of the reasons why I don't like doing it with bone dry, because there's no water in your clay and your paper doesn't want to stick. So we put a little bit of water there, and then we're going to set it on. And then push it down. Let's see, and we're here Friday too, right? Okay, so Friday we're going to talk about wheel throwing, and I'll talk a little bit about underglaze painting. All right, so we have our colors, and we're just going to come in here, and there's a couple of things I would pay attention to. The direction of your brush is going to be important. How runny your material is going to be important. If it's really runny, nice. I don't want to use it because it's going to kind of bleed under. But I'm going to just come in and just carefully brush on there. And I'm doing what right now? What's this paper called?
Stencils.
A stencil. So it's just on there, and then I peel it off. And remember, a stencil is a negative that creates a positive, right? Okay, so we're going to set that aside and let it dry. I love these things. And these things are, I don't know if I have a project out. These things are transfers. And so let me grab a project I started working on for another class. And transfers, anytime you transfer information, you can start creating layers. So I started creating this little thing. And I'm just going to take this and I'm going to create some layers or surface. And I don't really care how it goes on. I'm just going to set that on there and peel it off. And now it has just a little bit of information there. So as I start to build up my surface, I'll have multiple layers. The way I do layering is not, a lot of people don't like, well, let me rephrase that. A lot of people don't want to do that because they want to do some very precise things, and that's okay. All right, let's do this one. So we have a car and we have a car. So with this car, I'm going to start by doing this. And this is one of the things. So let me go over a couple of in order. Spritz the stencil, seal it to the clay in whatever order you think is best. And that's important because if I want to do I like to do my backgrounds first, and then I'll do my foregrounds. And what that means is this. We're going to put the car right in the middle there. And we're going to come in here. We're going to have a green sky. We'll do a yellow sky. And we're going to come in here, and I'm going to paint over the top. Like so. And then I'm going to paint the bottom. Again, the colors you use today don't matter, but they may matter to you in the long run. So maybe you want this black, maybe you want it brown. You kind of choose. All right, we go there, and then I'm going to grab something like this. And peel it up. Now, the car was masked out, right? So we're going to take that, slap that on right there. And now there's a little side leg car tattoo. And then we're going to take this and stencil over it. I'm not going to take the time to do it, but a lot of times I'll go in and increase my size just a little bit. So I'll cut around it just a little bit. Or sometimes I'll just stretch the paper just a little bit. So I can see those colors. And we're going to grab another color. And this car will be a great place to do sgraffito. So I can come in here and paint it, let it dry, and then come in and carve out windows, or sorry, scratch out windows. I can scratch out details. So that's a little bit runny. So it might bleed through. That'll be okay though. Clean it up. And then you just come in there and fill that up. Blood through right there. Okay, and so we have the background, we have the car, and then when it's dry, not shiny, I can come in and add those details. I can either paint it on, I can scratch them off. You kind of choose what direction that's going to go. All right, so kind of fun there. I think this is the last one. The same thing I did with the car. Oh, I didn't do the mountain. We'll do the mountain as well. Sometimes when I have a lot of information, like a pattern, like this, I'll come over here. Instead of using a paintbrush, I'll use some sort of like a foam brush. And so I'll come in here. And this way I can kind of press down on it. Oh, that's one mistake. That is a sure sign that I did not wet it enough. Because it's pulling up. While I'm doing this, do you have any questions, comments, what ifs? All right, I'm going to pull that off. And we can come in and clean that up. Again, it's a little bit dry. I should have made that a little wetter. And then one more thing, let's do this mountain. So you have to decide, do I want to do the background first, the foreground first, the image first? You kind of choose. I usually like to do the sky first when I do a mountain. And if I do the sky first, that means I need to put the mountain down because it's masking out everything else. And then we'll just come in. Nope, that's not. Come in with this. If you want to, you can come in and do multiple colors. Just don't dip them back in the bottles. And you peel that. It's a little harder to see with light colors, but the mountain's there. And then we're going to come and put that there, right? And again, if you're like, I don't know if I like the way I draw, I don't know, I'm not confident drawing, whatever, this is a good way to find some information, get that information on there. And then for me, if you take it one step further and add layers or do some sgraffito to it, it'll just look a little bit nicer, a little bit better. So now we have a mountain with a nice green mountain with a sunrise. Okay. And again, if you choose it, you can make it happen. You can be more detailed. I wouldn't go too detailed, but you can. A couple other things I wanted to go over. So, paint the colored slip or underglaze on clay. So you've sealed it, you paint it on. You can let it dry a little bit. Gently pull it off. Repeat as you want. So depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Most of these stencils and masks are good for maybe 2, maybe 3 if you're being careful. If they dry, then you can come in and use them again and wet them up. But very rarely do I get them to function more than 2 or 3 transfers or moves. Repeat as needed. Some options you have when it's dried or drier. You can scratch off to create texture and depth. You can paint layers, and then you can also come in and clean up. Maybe there's an area that you're like, oh, that bled. You could come in here and just lightly scratch that to clean that up. And then you let it dry and kind of finish your project off from there. The last few things you'll be doing are the masking, the underglaze painting, and sgraffito. Now, if you're doing sgraffito, either as a whole or as part, let's say you wanted to do a pattern in that mountain with sgraffito, perfectly acceptable. Sgraffito takes longer because you need to let it dry, you let it get almost a hard leather hard, and then you can start to scratch it off. So kind of plan that out as you move forward, that you're not just going, I can wait till the last day to do sgraffito. Oh, my project's still wet. It's okay. It's not okay. You need to make sure that you are paying attention to those things. All right, that's it. 30 minutes.